All we need to smile at each other, wish for your brother, help one another. All we need is love. All we need to honor our mother, shelter our sisters.
Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Alhamdulillah rabbil alamin wa bihi nasta'in wassalatu wassalamu ala rasulil amin wa ba'd. In a moment I felt myself like in UIA. I really feel myself like sitting with UIA students. But anyway, inshallah, looking back at the topic of our workshop today, it just remind me of my discussion with some of my Singaporean students. So in my class we have few Singaporeans and Indonesian students. So are they here? No, they're not around. I was telling my Singaporean students that they were discussing about the political involvement of Muslims in Singapore, or the involvement or the participation of Muslims in the political life of Singapore. So I told them, because they asked me, is it darurat? Because some of the Muslims in Singapore, they believe they must not participate in any political activities in Singapore or some social activities in Singapore because they're living in a Darul Kufr. Simply because Singapore is not the abbot of Islam, it's an abbot of Kufr, if it's not abbot of Harbi. So they said, can we participate? Because some of our elders are saying that any participation in those political activities, it only could be considered as darura. And darura tubihul mahzurat. It is in a state of necessity only. And darura tuqaddar biqadariha. And darura has its limits. So I told them, I beg to differ, because from what I've learned, from what I've known, that the participation of Muslims in any countries that they are residing, be it Singapore, be it Malaysia, be it United Kingdom, Indonesia, any European countries, even in Israel, it is fardu kifayah. It is wajib upon every Muslim to actively participate in the political life of any countries. You see why? Simply because in Surah Al Imran, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has been telling us, وَكَذَلِكَ جَعَلْنَاكُمْ أُمَّةً وَسَطًا لِتَكُونُوا شُهَدَاءَ عَلَى النَّاسِ. I think I've mentioned that earlier in our discussion, that when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gave us that designation as witnesses, shuhada, this has been mentioned by Tariq Ramadan in his book to be a European Muslim. He thought why Muslims should participate in the political life of any countries they're residing, because it is wajib, it is part of their missions as the witnesses. We are there to bring the voice of Islam. We are there to show the people the values that we adhere to, which is very universal and very beneficial to others. And also I told them that simply because any participation in the political life in any country that any Muslims living in, it is part of Amar Ma'ruf Nahi Munkar. What's that ayah in Surah Al Imran verse 104? And they may sprung from you ummatan yad'una ila al-khair, and there must be a group from Muslims that invite to goodness, inviting ila khair and enjoin right, wa ya'muruna bil ma'ruf wa yanhauna 'anil munkar, and to forbid evils. And when you are being a part of the political actors, you will have the opportunity to deliver this message of Amar Ma'ruf Nahi Munkar, the idea of Nasiha, the idea of Islah that we have discussed a couple of minutes ago. So in order to crystallize, in order to enshrine all these values, to bring the message of Islam, the message of humanity, the message of Islam to mankind, to bring the message of mutual recognition, mutual acknowledgement, the message of mercy, the message of justice, the message of, let me say, rahmah, towards not only humankind, but also towards the environment, towards the animal kingdom, you must participate in the political life. And by only that, you could enshrine the very meaning of becoming the shuhada, and the very meaning of becoming rahmatan lil alamin, the agent of mercy. So in order to be able to do that, we have to be empowered. And for Muslim youth, we are not waiting others to empower us, but we are self-empowered by our ontological awareness, by what we believe. I believe. I believe. Okay. For what we believe that this is our duty. To amar ma'ruf nahi munkar, and for that we are involving in those any political what we say activities. And when we talk about political activities, we have to segregate between partisan political activities and the wider scope of civil society activities. For me, I favor more the empowerment of civil society. We, as part of the civil society actors, we have a lot of role to play. We have a huge room to play. Because if you involve with partisan politics, there are a lot of, should we say, deterrents. There's a lot of impediments. Especially when living in a country like Malaysia, we have AUKU. Yeah. You are being chained with AUKU. You cannot say much, you cannot do much. Okay, I disagree with AUKU, and I believe none in this room believe and agree with AUKU. But again, we have to admit that we are living in this reality. So within this limited reality, I think we are pushed to opt for the second what we say choice, which is the civil society activities. When we talk about civil society activities, wallahi, brothers and sisters, we have a lot to do. We can do many things based on our ontological conviction. As an agent of mercy towards human being. Oh, just remind me of 3 months ago, or maybe 4 months ago, I involved in a forum, in a dialogue with a Christian representative. There was a close program organized by IDEAS, Institute for Democratic and Economic, blah, blah, blah. So it was a closed session because they don't want it to get exposed to the mainstream media, which are very suspicious towards the Christians. You know, nowadays, the day we're living in Malaysia is a very unhealthy environment towards mutual understanding. Allah SWT told us in Surah Hujurat, Inna khalaqnakum min dhakarin wa untha wa ja'alnakum shu'uban wa qaba'ila lita'arafu. I should mention this ayah in that lecture just now. But anyway, Allah SWT said He created us from a pair of men and women, and from that pair sprung shu'uban wa qaba'ila, nations, tribes, races. For what purpose? Lita'arafu. What's the meaning of ta'arafu? The very literal meaning of it is to know each other. That's the very beginner's part of it. Because ta'arafu derived from the root word of arafah. For anybody who learn Arabic, UAE students, again, you know that every Arabic word, they have a root word. So the root word for ta'arafu is arafah. And it's sigha mufa'ala, musharaka. Mutual, knowing each other. But knowing each other is not only the meaning that arafah implies. Arafah is also the root word of ma'rifah. And the synonym of ma'rifah is ilm. So ta'arafu also indicates li ta'alamu, to learn, to mutually learning from each other, to mutually exchange each other's knowledge, to mutually, in order to learn from each other, we have to acknowledge others. We have to acknowledge, mutually acknowledging each other. We have to mutually recognizing each other. Yes, there are a lot of good values in every nation, in every race, in every civilization, even in every religion. Yes, we have our own faith. We are firm to it. We don't need to compromise it. We don't need to negate it. We still cling to the hablullah, wa'tasimu bihablillah. But again, that does not stop us from learning from each other. There's a lot of good values we could learn from the Taoists. There's a lot of good elements that we can learn from Buddhism. There's a lot of things that we could learn from Christianity ethos. I'm not trying to say that we should embrace the religion, no, but a lot of things that, it's common sense. We share a lot of common grounds with them. But this is different from acknowledging their faith or their religious, their aqidah is different. But what I mean here, get rid of the high planes. Get rid of the high planes, we deal with things on the ground. So in that forum, we were talking about the role of religious or religious institutions in curbing poverty, in tackling poverty. So, Alhamdulillah, it was an eye-opener for me, but it was very unfortunate when we tried to compare with our ideals, with their ideals. I think we have a lot more to be proud of with our ideals and our conceptual things. But when it comes to the activities, to the reality, to the implementation, it's very unfortunate to know that what they are doing is much more than what we are and what we have done. So, there was two sessions. The first session was between Police Mufti, Dr. Juanda, and the representative of Muslim Church Council, the Secretary General of Muslim Church Council, and my session was me with another church activist who was also, he's an OKU, disabled person. He has been living with wheelchair since he was born. Wheelchair, not wheelchair. English education. So, this kind of Malaysian stuff, they know it better. Penting English education. Okay, so he was not only a church activist, but also an activist for OKU, disabled people. He has been fighting for OKU rights in the churches. When he was talking about the churches, and he was condemning and attacking the churches for not providing the facilities for the OKU or for the disabled, I just hide my face. The mosque even worse. The mosque even worse. We don't have any facilities for the OKU at all. I still remember there was an incident in Luton, England, when I was in the UK. It shows how the mentality of the people in that part of the world. There was a mosque and they have a new jama'ah. He's a blind guy and he has to carry a dog with him, a guide dog. Because he couldn't find anybody who could guide him, he only have a dog. So, but he's a constant masjid goer. Subhanallah, even for Fajr prayer during winter. You can imagine how winter looks like over there. But he's a very istiqamah guy. But the only thing, he carry dogs. And you are not allowed to leave your dog outside the building. You will charge under the Animal Rights Act. It's a crime. It's very sinful, even in our Sharia point of view. Is it? Okay, to abandon the dogs outside. We can build a special place for the dogs. But anyway, he just cannot live there. So the Jama'ah was having a dilemma. Should we allow the dog to be kept, to be put inside the mosque? So they decided, this shows how openness they are. They decided we should have a special place for the dog inside the mosque, and they built a cage for the dog. No, it was not a cage, a special place to put the dog. Whenever he comes to the mosque, he just leaves the dog there. Imagine if it happened in Malaysia. what will happen not only to the dog owner? What will happen? The very next earthquake, the very next day, Utusan Malaysia will come out with a very front page, Islam telah dihina. A very provocative headlines. Islam is being Islam in threat. Waliyazubillah, this Utusan Malaysia, I'm sorry if there are any Utusan Malaysia reporters here, but you have to change the mentality of your chief editors. I mean, it's disastrous. We are not building bridge to the others. We're not inviting others to live in a coexistence. We are chasing away from Islam, not only from Islam, from the Muslims. Okay, so there's a lot of things you could do, brothers and sisters. So if you look, that church activist, that OKU, that disabled person, when he talk about the animal rights, he talk about disabled people rights, which consists, I mean, they are the largest minority in in Malaysian population, disabled people. The blinds, those who are paralyzed and etc. And I think some of us also part of this community. And they deserve a lot of rights that they're being denied, even inside the worship places. It's very unfortunate. So I think Muslim youth, we can do a lot. We can do a lot. It's not only about masjid. It's not only about, the other day I was reading an article written by Utaya Sankar, Utaya SB, in Malaysian Insider, that is a, should I say, pengkritik sastra. Yeah? Pengkritik sastra. So he was interviewing my friend who is a film producer. What's his name? Nizam Zakar. Actually his name was Yusuf, but he changed Nizam. Anyway, so they were talking about Islamic movies, Islamic drama. Is it how very stereotype or how very typical of our Islamic movies and dramas? The very moment you watch it at the beginning, you can predict the end. It starts with people inside discotheque, she will be ended up putting headscarf and on the praying mat and crying. Or even worse, penjaga kubur. Okay, you see these people doing wrong things, he died and then something happened inside the kubur and everybody became good Muslim. Oh, subhanAllah, that's very simple. I never thought that that's the most effective way of doing da'wah. Why didn't Rasulullah do this? Why didn't he introduce it to us? Because that's not the way. That's not the way life going on. That is not the reality. We're trying to impose a fake reality on ourselves. We're trying to, we're teasing ourselves, But again, for Muslim youth, I know your generation, why you are coming to this program, the Twin of Faith, is an English-speaking program. I know it's not only because it is in English, but because you want something different. Something that you couldn't get from the mainstream Islam. Sorry, not mainstream Islam. from the mainstream Malaysian Islamic, I don't know how to put it, but authority, okay, I hate to use that word. Because I believe in self-autonomous Muslim. We self-regulate ourselves. We don't need anybody to regulate something, to impose on ourselves. It's our conviction. At the end of the day, during the day of Masha, will you bring Jakim to speak behalf of you? Will you bring the Jabatan Agama to speak behalf of you in front of Allah SWT? You never. When you stand before Allah SWT, it's between you and Allah. Whatever you have done in the worldly life, you're responsible. You're going to be questioned by Allah SWT. You cannot say, oh, because my Ustad told me this, because Jabatan Agama, the Mufti told me that. No. It's between you and Allah SWT. You be responsible in what you choose. So I believe in self-empowerment. We're talking about youth empowerment, are not we? So we're talking about self-empowerment first and foremost as Muslims. So based on this shuhada, the concept of shuhada, the concept of agent of mercy, the concept of ihsan, the concept of islah, the concept of amar ma'ruf nahi munkar, I believe Muslim youth, we should do something. Every single small thing helps. For you, for the community, for Islam, and for the humankind. And I believe that is the main purpose of Islam. Allah SWT, when He sent Prophet Muhammad SAW, when He sent Him to the companions, when He sent Islam to the world, it's not only to ask people to pray inside the mosque, it's not only to ask people to read Quran. I mean, beyond that is how to implement the teaching of Quran for the well-being of human being, for the well-being of every single human community in this world, be they non-Muslim, atheists, communists, whatever they are. They deserve to receive that mercy, that rahmah that Allah has sent, that Allah has taught Prophet Muhammad SAW in the Quran, and how Rasulullah SAW has shown it to us. They deserve to get that, and we are the agents to get that things to reach them. So, is it a Q&A session or what? It's not. Oh, it's interactive. Okay, I think that's only from me, and no, that's not, I think it's good to open for question and answers, or exchange of ideas. I do believe in exchange of ideas, rather a Q&A, because I'm not a sheikh. I'm only a small people like you guys. Wong cilik kata Indonesia. Okay, wallahu alam. I really hope you could contribute and share something in this workshop. Okay, tafadhal. Yeah, I can hear you. No worry.
Islam or general Muslim will have so many problems, and as what Yusuf brother we said, we need more creativity rather than fatwa. And then to be creative in this time, we need to create maybe new thing, especially youth, and to be creative. We don't have guideline or someone to refer to because it's new. Okay, do you get what I mean? Because sometimes we waver whether what we doing is right or wrong. But if we try to ask scholars or friends, or their answer is just not up to the level, because we need to deal with the globalization issues, cultural issues, political issues, and all that. So the movement that youth going to do is the creative and the thing that's maybe never done by others before. So how do we need to
give an example of how creative those creative stuffs are?
No, because everybody have their potential. As Prof. Tariq Ramadan said, we need to refer back how we grow up to do different. Maybe we grow up in the hedonism situation, so we back to that kind of life to make something out of it. So maybe perhaps me in raised up in the Christian school, and with the hedonism, sports and all things, maybe I should go back to that kind of environment. And for me, as a single, I think I might use marriage as the chance to go back to attract my partner is my chance to like that. So I choose non-Muslim rather than Muslim, and then maybe.
You mean a converted Muslim or?
No, not yet converted. We choose and then from which country we want, which background we want. So it's very specific to what we want. But we couldn't we couldn't justify whether what we are doing is right or wrong between me and God. Maybe some friends would never understand. Scholars would not understand. Maybe they can give the basic haram or halal, but can we give opinions about that? Because we need many creative things and new things to change things.
Okay, thank you very much. Even though I don't really grasp the whole idea, but I think I could understand what you mean.
Yes, that's true. It's very important to do da'wah. It's very important to bring change. It's wajib for us to involve in, like what I've mentioned before, in order to spread the message of Islam. But again, I think as Muslims, based on our ontological awareness, we have that limitation. But that limitation must not be something that will impede us from doing anything. We should be creative. I mean, okay, for example, I mean, I might have a bit disagreement with some of the things that being done in the media by the authorities. But again, sometimes when I try to be honest, to try to be frank, when looking at the way they're working within the limitation, I think they are being creative. But again, sister, when you talk about limitation should not impede you from doing da'wah. I think sometimes it's a challenge for you. Yes, as Muslims, sometimes we find ourselves in a very straight and tight jacket when we involve in the issues, for example, gender issues, I suppose, when you involve in the issues that involve music and culture. Again, so, but again, it reminds me of this group, Studio Mu'alaf. Have you heard of Studio Mu'alaf? Okay, this is a very creative group established by Shifu Maszlee. Again, so they're a group of converts who are very talented in music and arts. So they just don't want to waste their talent. Instead of abandoning what they have, they try to explore this da'wah through sitcom and da'wah through music, because they sing. I mean, they have beautiful voice. You look like Alex Go, for those who know. Alex, I think, being an ex-church singer, he has that, should I say, gothic voice, a very kind of, memang sedap punya professional singer. Takkanlah when we become Muslim, he has to abandon all those stuff. I think it's a waste. So what happened? Shifu Maszlee tried to get all these converts and converting them into what he called artivists, converting the converts. Yeah. Artivists, artists and activists. They're doing the artist stuff, at the same time they're doing the activist job. So now, apart from their TV programs, they're also initiating the dialogue harmony, harmonious dialogue with non-Muslim. Believe me, the other day when they were in Ipoh with Soka Gakkai is a Buddhist organization which are very active globally. When I went to Japan, I was surprised to know that Soka Gakkai also have their own political party, and they were part of the government a couple of years back. So being an active Buddhist organization, they have a lot of things to share with us. So what happened when Shifu managed to convince them to organize this dialogue harmonious dialogue, they were very overwhelmed with the way Muslim could engage with them. They were hoping since ages that Muslim could engage with them in a harmonious dialogue, to exchange ideas, to exchange values that we have, exchange thoughts. They wanted to learn a lot of things from us, and we also want to learn a lot of things from them. So what happened? The very unique thing about this Studio Mu'alaf, they have this theme, Satu Akidah Sejuta Wajah. One faith, million faces. Why? Because the group itself, the Studio Mu'alaf itself, consists of various faces. Iban, Malanau, Kadazan, Bidayo, Chinese, Indian, Punjabi, again. And what else do they have? Okay, these kind of faces, which I think in Malaysia, they're not representing Muslim. According to the mainstream authority dictated Islam. Because in Malaysia normally, even to become Muslim, you must be Malay. You must wear songkok, which I never have one. You must wear a certain, okay lah, baju kebangsaan, with due respect, with baju kebangsaan, but please don't impose on people. They have to change their name to a Malay name, while the Malay need not to change their un-Islamic name. Yeah, it is very double standard. You have, for example, Lim Keng Kang converted to Islam. You force him to change into Ali or into Omar Abdul Aziz or whatever. But when a Malay Muslim born and was given a very un-Islamic names, the other days, one of my friends in FB named his son as Fabregas, Muhammad Fabregas. And some name their child Siti, apalah, I don't know. Sometimes some names that does not represent Muslim name at all. But because he's a Malay or she's a Malay, then it's being accepted. Okay. Even some of the Malay names, even Malay names, they are not Muslim names. Tunggul, Sulong. It's not Arabic at all. Awang. Okay. Awang, Sulong, Tunggul. Why don't you ask them to change their name? It's not an Arabic name. But when it comes to the converts, you force them to change their name. Not only that, they were forced to change their father's name. I'm talking about Malaysian situation. I mean, you talk about what his name, Divesh or Danesh, whatever his name. His father's name is Mutusami, Ramasami, Lim Ahlek, or whatever their name is, and you force them to change their father to Abdullah. And only God knows who's the Abdullah is. If you ask the father, he said, oh, now your son converted to Islam, you also converted. Hey, you never converted. What? He said, but you changed your name to Abdullah? I never converted. You know, this thing only creates a fear amongst non-Muslim to become Muslim, especially among the parents. Because they thought once their children converted to Islam, they have to abandon their father. They have to abandon their parents. And not to talk about fiqh issues. It's even worse. Of course, with due respect of Shafi'i mazhab, with due respect of whatever people believe in. But for the converts, they found a lot of problems dealing with the traditional Muslim practice in Malaysia. They went back to their parents' house, they couldn't do their prayer inside the house. Why? Because there are a lot of pictures, because there are dogs inside the house. When they go back to their parents' house, they couldn't eat. Even if their parents buying the food from outside, from Muslim stall, but they couldn't eat inside their parents' house. Why? Because the cutleries are not being washed with soil. Tak kena samak lagi. And a lot of those stuff. They couldn't go back to their parents' house during Tahun Baru Cina. Why? Because it's un-Islamic. They couldn't even congratulate their Christian families of Merry Christmas. Why? Because they are Muslim now. And all these things create more fear into the heart of non-Muslims. Okay, let's go back to Studio Mu'alaf. So for this Studio Mu'alaf, even though they are activists, but still they need a point of reference. And Shifu Nasir admitted, he said, okay, we are doing da'wah through arts or whatever, but we are empty inside. We need some input. We need some guidance. So we have that self-regulation into ourselves. If you don't have something inside, I want to say that you're self-regulating yourself. It's impossible. So for that, you need a guidance. You need a sheikh. You need a teacher. Okay, I'm with you. I'm with you in saying that it's hard to find those who understand. And most of the time we're dealing with ustaz, it's all about haram, haram, and haram. Yeah, haram, haram, haram. Yeah. Hey, where's the halal thing? Again, it's all about haram, haram. And they're thinking in a very positive, legalistic mentality. Okay, itu susah sangat lah. They're thinking in a very hukum-oriented way of thinking. As if Islam is only about halal and haram. And neglecting the aesthetic part of Islam. Kan? The arts, the values, the ethics, let us say, the mystic part of Islam, the spirituality within Islam. We try to abandon that. We try to look in a very legalistic way, approach. Haram. This is makruh. This is a little bit makruh and haram. What about that thing? That's not very helpful for da'wah. But again, sister, yes, you're right, but again, you must have a guidance. A point of reference. Okay. So, the next question will be, where to find it? God bless us actually with internet and YouTube and Twitter and BlackBerry messages and Yahoo Messenger and Google Messenger. We could communicate with any sheikh from all around the world. You can communicate with even Tariq Ramadan by sending him emails, but I doubt that he will reply you promptly. You can communicate with Sheikh Hamza Yusuf, for example. You can communicate with most of our mashayikh here that involved in this event. So, but again, you will say, Ustaz, believe me, 99% of them will say it's haram, what I'm doing. So if it is haram, if 99%, be it. You have to be creative to search for the non-haram means. You say, oh Ustaz, believe me, 60% say it's haram. You still have 40% what? Go for the 40%. But again, whatever you do, it must be based on argument, solid argument. Because what? At the end of the day, just like I mentioned earlier, you'll be standing before Allah SWT, you're responsible for what you're doing. You'll be accountable before Him. So if you believe what you're doing is right, and you can get support from any mashayikh saying that what you're doing is right, Bismillah tawakkaltu ala Allah. Okay, Wallahu a'lam. Okay, please sister. You can share the mic. We believe in equality.
Assalamualaikum.
Salam.
I have a question. I think interacting and engaging with non-Muslim, as you were explaining earlier, is very important. Because sometimes I do feel that we're a bit, as Muslim youth, sometimes we're a bit closed up or rigid in our understanding. So I agree with you in saying, sometimes we need to emphasize on the arts, the values, the spirituality of Islam. So my question is, how do you build that, build the bridges and, sort of overcome the gaps when you sort of explain or have discourse or discussion with, non-Muslim friends or youth? For example, how to reconcile sort of human rights. For example, they believe in freedom of religion, freedom of expression, freedom of assembly. And then you say, okay, but in Islam there are sort of limitations, and how do you reconcile this? How do you make your arguments with them? Because they're saying, okay, then you are not for freedom of expression and religion, because then, a lot of the other sensitive issues that come with it. So how do you sort of breach that gap? How do you interact with them? Because I think it's important. I think interfaith dialogue or discussion or discourse is very important, so that we don't, make them fear Islam, because it's such a beautiful religion. So that's my question to you. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Remind me of my friend, what is his name? Dr. Ridwan Fonton in IIUM. I think some of IIUM students are familiar with Dr. Ridwan. It's written Fontaine, his name, Ridwan Fontaine. He used to be a lecturer in MMU, now he's in UIA. It's all for jargon, IIU, UIA, MMU. Okay, so being a convert himself, and he's half British and half French. It's very awkward to have French, half British, half French, half British, half German. It sounds very... Okay, anyway. So, but he is he. So, he did mention about these issues. He said that when you engage in a discussion or in a debate with the non-Muslims, or some of my friends call the not yet Muslims, if it involves something about your religion, you have to make a disclaimer. You have to register your conviction at the very first place at La ilaha illallah. That's a very fundamental of it. So they will know where you're coming from. But again, when you talk about certain common sense, I don't think Islam is against that. For example, you're talking about freedom of expression, freedom of assembly, and etc. You're talking about poverty, you're talking about animal rights, you're talking about disabled people rights. If you try to avoid the high plains, I think we could reach a lot of agreements on that. But when it comes to things that relates to, certain controversial things like freedom of religion, the issue of murtad, the issue of, for example, just like I've been asked by this foreign minister, the vice minister of the foreign ministry of Japan, he asked, why don't women make the call for adhan? Women have more beautiful voice than men. So, I told them, because they have beautiful voice, we have to preserve their voice. When you make azan, you have to make it in a very loud voice, and that will ruin the beautiful voice of women. We have other stuff for women voice, but not for the azan, just to preserve. I don't say that's a very diplomatic answer, but again, it sounds kind of, trying to shun away from the discussion. But again, because that was not the proper place, that was not an appropriate place for that kind of discussion. But when you involve in a discussion about faith, we don't need to be apologetic. We said, okay, this is Islam, and based on our ontological awareness, this is what we believe. There's nothing wrong with it. If you find it something is not suitable with this one, why don't you look at million other stuff that you'll be okay with Islam? And I don't think that the issue of, for example, the murtad, whatever, I think there's a debate on it, and if you try to Google the opinion of Taha Jabir Al-Alwani in his latest book, La Ikrah Fid Din, the idea of Dr. Jamal Badawi and other scholars, you could find the other point of view. But again, with due respect to the majority point of view, we don't need to shun away or to be apologetic. But I think the problem is not with those hukum, the problem is with the attitude, how we deal with it. If you talk about the issue of murtad, I might have my own personal point of view, which might be different from the majorities, and that is not based on my liberal conviction or whatever. No, that is based from the Sunnah and based from the Quran. But again, like I mentioned, frequently, if you like to engage in a lot of activities with non-Muslim, try not to bring the hukum, not try to bring the theological elements, but try to bring the other part of Islam within the bigger picture of Islam, the values, the ethos, and stuff like that. Wallahu a'lam bisawab. Am I answering you, sister? Not really, yeah? Not really. Okay. So when are we ending the session? 1. 5 minutes. Okay. Last question, please.
I'd just like to ask something about for youth to be, let's say, as for now we have too many options in order for us to raise our kids, such as we can send them to Chinese school in order for them to get the proficiency in Chinese language, and we can send them to Islamic school so we can build Islamic foundation for them. And until recently, the empowerment of youth might be dictated on how many A's they get in the exam. So how can we find balance in this? Because I believe that because life only passes once, so how gonna educate or gonna raise our kids? Whether should we send them to such schools or because I've seen some of my friends, I'm sorry to be general, some of my friends who are very good in languages, but they are lacking in how they should go in Islamic basic fix or foundations. So can you give me some?
Okay, thank you.
I was invited by Sekolah Al-Amin. If you know the school, Sekolah Al-Amin, just behind IAUM, and they were celebrating. They are celebrating their 25th years of the school, and I did talk something about this kind of stuff. And for me, from my very ideal, I believe that the problem is with our educational system, our state-based educational system. Based on my ideals, I believe that schools should not be dictated by Ministry of Education. It should be given to the society. I believe in public school. Sorry, if you talk about public school here, it means government school. No, government school is state-funded school. I believe in Sekolah Rakyat. Okay, some might call it private school. Yes, you can call it private, but private connotes very different meaning in our Malaysian context. It brings the meaning of posh people sending their children to international private school. No, I didn't mean that. What I mean is public school, school that belong to the people, self-funded, where society being empowered, where school is very autonomous. They can teach whatever they want. But of course, there must be a national curriculum they should abide to. But again, the way they conduct, the way dress should be worn by the students, the recruitments of the teachers, and even the administration should be entrusted to the school administration and to the society. And I believe in small school instead of big school. The smaller school it is, the better. And I believe in the competition in educational system. This is what we have experienced throughout Muslim history. Throughout Muslim history, even universities, they are not under the state administration. They belong to the society. They were funded by Waqaf. They were funded by the people. The same thing with education. We should have more freedom. And when we talk about the freedom of education, schools should aim to build the characteristic of the students, the personality of the students, and not competing each other just to get more A's in exams. PMR, UPSR, no. I think the problem is here. In Malaysia, we emphasize only on exams, only on A's and etc. And we're not building characters among the students. That's a failure. So for Al-Amin, being a public school, being a society-based school, I congratulate them. They have been there for 25 years, and the products of Al-Amin, when they came to the university, to UIA, I can assure you, they are different from other students. They have this characteristic, they have the personality. Why? Because they are not being dictated by the state. They have more freedom. Okay. So I do encourage this type of schools. But again, what I told them, what they're lacking of is, they're still trapped in the cocoon of Muslim community. The school was initially built up by a group of activists who believe in certain ideals. They want to preserve it within their next generation. But again, they emerged. They shifted forward to embrace the society. But again, within the Muslim community. And they managed to educate Muslim children to be, to possess the quality that they believe in. But again, I told them, we must admit that we live in a multiracial and multi-religious society. First and foremost, I would like them to open their school even to non-Muslims. But maybe the non-Muslims are not ready in Malaysia yet for that, and they're not ready for that too. But what I suppose to them, they should introduce RE, religious education. They should have a twinning program with other vernacular schools. For example, they have a twinning program with Sekolah Cina Feng Yu. And at the same time, they have a twinning program with Sekolah Orang Asli. You know, one school in urban area and one school at rural area, to expose the student to the reality of Malaysia. When you talk about twinning, it involves the exchange of teachers, exchange of students, and visits, exchange of visits. And furthermore, if they want to have RE, religious education, it also involves knowing other religions. Not from the Muslims, but from the people of that faith. So when I was in the UK, I was the president of the Islamic Society. The Islamic Society is responsible to the only mosque in Durham. It's a small village in the UK, in the northeastern part of the UK. Kampung lah, di Pantai Timur. Kan? So it's orang putih, kampung orang putih. And that's the only mosque that belongs to the university and belongs to the Muslim community. So what we have, we receive a lot of visitors from schools. They came to our mosque as part of their RE education, RE subject. They learn how Muslims are praying, how Muslims make their azan. And some of the students, they did participate in our Jama'ah prayer with their own style, you know. So it was very fascinating. And some of them, they did try making wudu during winter. And I can see a lot of them shivering. Yeah. How a Muslim could live 5 times a day doing ablution, doing wudu? But it's kind of fascinating things for them. And not only that, it's an eye-opener for the students when they go to gurudwaras, to temples, to churches. My daughters, they experience that. Visiting churches, visiting gurudwaras, visiting mosques. At least they know that they're not alone in this planet. At least they know that other religions do exist. At least they have this idea of how do the people think. How do the people of other faith think and what they are doing. At least it will eradicate degree of prejudice like what we are living with in Malaysia, unfortunately. So I do encourage this RE, religious education, and also exchange of visits. And for you youth, I believe, should you belong to any organization, you should start this idea of bridging. The idea of bridging. And like I said, try to avoid high planes when you try to establish relation with other religion. High planes or theological issues could only be discussed in a special forum with Shakirit, with Lim Joo Sun, those people. But when you talk about society, you talk about bridging the gaps, you talk about harmonious relation, we exchange our idea of values. Yes, when you engage in dialogue, you don't need to be apologetic, you be what you are, but again, with your acknowledgement of others. That's the most important thing. But again, believe me, in Malaysia, we always been clouded by the media, by the narrow interpretation of Islam adopted, unfortunately, by the so-called mainstream authority dictated Islam, and also by most of the ustad and ustazah. They have this kind of mentality they try to impose, and when they try to interact with others as if they're talking with people of the same faith and with jargons that they couldn't understand, and they try to impose, they try to preach. People don't like to be preached. I know you guys don't like the idea of being preached, yeah, but you like to exchange ideas. That's how it should be. And I think the time is up, and Jazakumullah khairan, and I'm sorry if I didn't answer well what you asked, and I hope you did benefit from this session. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.